I just don't interact with trade anymore. SSF for life. So yeah, so that's a common sentiment. I share the sentiment. I don't really interact with trade anymore. I do solo self-found for life because I find the barriers to trading being too time consuming. I understand the thought process of wanting to build a reputation within the game and talk with people into the game. But it's too time consuming when the average person, the average gamer has 2 to 4 hours to play each night. And then how do you convince them to spend their 2 to 4 hours each night on your game? Well, if an hour and a half of that has to be in trading, they're just going to, one, not play your game, or two, opt out of trading. And so it defeats the social interaction of trading because people are just going to opt out. And opting out feels bad because then you start hitting a wall in the game for progression at times. And, the aforementioned 2 to 4 hours is not enough in a lot of cases to overcome that wall, right? So let's go from there. People want to be able to compare prices and not have to always spend millions on middle grounds gear. Yes, having some sort of ability to understand how much stuff is. Tri-stat mage pristine gear selling for 15 million is not necessarily bad, but understanding that that's 15 million and then understanding that, willpower, intelligence, spell crit mage gear is then going to be 2 to 5 million. And so that way people can progress into it, right? It should be a reasonable expectation that you should be able to gear your character out with not having to spend 20 million gold. It should not be 20 million gold to gear out your character. Now, if you want to spend 30 million gold to gear out your character to go run demi-plane, absolutely, right? Or if you want to be a PvP god, absolutely, because you're trying to be in the fringes of the top player base. And so, yeah, right? If you're trying to be a top player, it's going to cost you money to be a top player. But if you're not trying to be a top player, you should at least be able to gear your guy out in kind of solid progression. So I'll go from there. Some people like Dreadmyst database. Some people think it's easily manipulated and it's happy to be down, right? Because you could list fake items to drive up the prices, right? A lot of people were like, I have an item to sell. I'm going to list fake items to drive up the prices, and then I'm going to list my real item. And that feels bad. So you don't, because that's market manipulation, and market manipulation is illegal in the real market for a reason, right? I mean, I don't have to explain that across the board, but that's why something in-game, regulated in-game, that allows people to not create fake listings is probably the way to go. Some people say an auction house. Some people say an in-game trade forum, right? Something along those lines. So, there's you can still market manipulate using the Discord. So the Discord's not a good reason to not market manipulate. What I mean by that is like I can link this item, I can take a picture of this item, and then I can say this item's worth 15 million, but I'm selling it for 10 million, right? And I can be like, I have this item, it's 15 million, right? And then that manipulates the market. So one person says at an auction house that has a fee depending upon the gear that you put in, obviously how much gold you want for it. So players can't put 30 million items in the auction house anymore since nobody's going to buy it. Yeah. An auction house or some sort of trading forum or channels that allow trading. So people want player stores. I think if you really want to attribute it back to the original Diablo 2, you have channels dedicated for trading, right? Maybe channel 1 is dedicated to Ranger, channel 2 dedicated to Mage. Okay, and so people can be on those channels with player stores in those channels, right? And so the player stores are not everywhere on every channel, but they're kind of like focused in specific areas. So 294. Oh yeah. So, and then we got a lot of people saying a lot of good things about me, which feels really good. So so yeah, so some people are saying people are paying a lot more for gear right now because they're panic buying something when they actually see it because they're afraid that the trade system is going to get worse. And so a lot of people see something that somebody posts immediately and then they immediately jump on it, right? So People agree with not liking third-party websites, but if you're not going to like third-party websites, you need an avenue in game that's better than trading. So currently, I think the kind of the resounding thought process is there's a lot of different ways to trade. Not all of them are amazing, but there are definitively some bad ways to do it. And currently, it takes a long time to sell items and a long time to buy items. And once again, if you're trying to cater to a player base that has limited play time, you want to respect players' time and energy playing your game. You want them to feel comfortable to log into your game, that they can spend 2 to 5 hours playing per day. But if it takes 2 hours to buy a piece of gear and then they have to go run a dungeon, it's really eating their time, especially when they have to full clear a dungeon and when there's constant disconnects happening. So you're really hurting people's ability to want to spend time. They want to play the game, but sometimes they feel like they have to invest too much time to play the game. And when that happens, right, when it's like time investment, in order to get to improve, starts getting too much for specific players, they're just going to move on and they're not going to enjoy it. Okay. And I can add more stuff in there, but that's going to be a nice little clip video that I can send